Let's talk about the Easter Bunny.
Hey, welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you real conversations for the souls and strategies of ministry leaders. My name is Phil Gifford, and I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Pope.
Let's talk about the Easter Bunny.
Whether you are a seasoned pastor or ministry leader or just stepping into leadership for the first time, we're here to share stories from ministries, insights, and some practical tips to help you lead strategically while not forgetting about your soul. In each episode, we'll dive into topics that matter for your mission, your calling, and your own growth as a leader.
Okay, let's talk about the Easter Bunny.
All right, the Easter Bunny.
Churches use the Easter Bunny.
We're going to go right there, huh?
I think that's a good way to start. So we're talking about different ways to think about Easter outreach. Is the Easter Bunny an Easter outreach?
I don't know. We have had the Easter Bunny at events before.
I'm not anti the Easter Bunny, but I do think some churches think that if you just do an egg hunt badly, you get an Easter Bunny, the creepiest person in your church, to dress up in a suit. They think that's not outreach. And I don't think it is.
We had...
You dress up in the suit. You were the creepiest person.
Yeah, I am. Wait, is that okay to say? No. We have done plenty of Easter egg hunts as our church. When thinking about Easter egg hunt, we did a lot of Easter egg hunts because we launched around Easter. So we did.
Right. You guys do like 5 every year, don't you?
We were doing 5 every year. But that's part of our neighborhood strategy. Like we were doing them in neighborhoods, trying to reach out to people in neighborhoods. So that was part of our strategy. But one year we did Easter egg hunt, and the only a couple years have we had the Easter Bunny, and normally it's random. Like some guy just shows up in an Easter Bunny costume, which is kind of weird.
Oh,
but
that's
there was a neighbor that we knew.
Oh,
we didn't know he was coming as Easter Bunny. We knew this neighbor like safe, but like he came as Easter Bunny. So yeah, kind of that's a little.
That's
weird.
Actually really weird. I don't think anything you said made it feel better.
The more I start talking about this, the more I'm like, maybe we shouldn't do Easter Bunny.
I guess where I'm going with this is that Easter is an opportunity to reach your community.
And it's more than an Easter Bunny.
It's more than an Easter Bunny. It's more than eggs. And I think strategy applied, right? Like if there's a season where lost people are more willing to talk about spiritual things, Christmas is like this, Easter's like this, I think we should take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I just don't think the weird, campy, churchy stuff is actually the answer.
Yeah, I think that Easter as a whole, it goes against the pushback that I think that churches should build their calendar around big services like Christmas or Easter and build their worth and build their outreach hopes and build their we're going to really this Easter is going to really change the culture of our church. I mean, it might.
Right.
And I don't want to discount what God can do in an Easter morning service, but chances are you might have a bunch of people who are either connected to your church loosely, show up for one Sunday and then go home. And you've just spent the last 6 months planning for one service that has had very minor impact.
Yeah.
And so most churches, they do the Easter egg hunt, they do the Easter Bunny, they plan for a big Easter service and they hope for the best. And I just feel like I'm trying to think differently about Easter.
Same.
And so that's why this episode is 4 different ways to think about Easter outreach, because we're just kind of learning together. How do we leverage the season for an effective way to reach out that is not just really about Easter or Easter bunnies?
Yeah.
And so the overarching theme that I wrote down this morning when I was thinking about this episode was, how do we leverage the season, not the service? Like, how do we take this season when people are probably thinking about Jesus, thinking about family time, whatever it is, how do we leverage the season, not the service itself for Easter, right?
Yeah. No, that's good. If I could I'll start us off with the first one.
Let's go. Yep.
And I love this because I can kind of relate this to us last year. It's serve before you invite. So before you invite them to the Easter service, before you try to, before you throw a party, I remember thinking this a few months ago for another episode we were recording. Before you throw a party, you better make some friends. Right? Like if you're going to throw a party and invite over all your friends and you don't have any relationships, you're just going to waste money on balloons.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times churches will just throw a party. Hey, we're going to have a big Easter service. We're going to pour all this money into it. And they put postcards all over town. And guess what? Every other church does too. Yep. So I don't really think that, at least today, at least I think Maryland is probably post-Christian, or we're getting there.
Yep.
I think in a post-Christian world,
nobody cares about your Easter service.
No, because they've seen Easter invites their whole life. And they don't go because they don't care, because it's not their thing, or they already go to a different church.
Yep.
But when you actually meet needs in your community, when you anchor your church in loving and serving, we just did an episode on how to move your people towards mission. When your people are actively engaged in the mission of reaching your community for Jesus, all of a sudden that serving can lead to invitation.
Right.
Last year at our Easter thing, we had a breakfast, I think, before service, and we got Wawa donated a bunch of stuff, and we bought a bunch of pastries. And we basically just had a breakfast for the homeless on Easter. Now, we had people who were poor, people who were lower income come as well. We also had people who were wealthy come. But what was incredible is we had our highest Easter. I mean, Easter's hard for our church because college kids leave. So we typically decline in attendance on Easter. We had our highest Easter attendance ever. Astronomically so. And it wasn't because we're actually going to be interviewing our worship pastor soon. We didn't do anything special for worship. We didn't we just had church and I preached about the resurrection. There was no special elements. The only thing we did was we had built relationships with this low income community. So when we actually had breakfast, they were willing to come to breakfast. And when they came to breakfast, they knew Pastor Richard or Pastor Keith and Andrew and Chris. And when they see these guys and these guys are like, hey, we love you. Do you want to stay for church? Everybody stayed for church.
Yeah.
But that wasn't because we had a really good service. It was because we had created a rhythm of loving these people. So when we eat with them, they're like, we might as well stay. So we're doing it that way again this year.
If you don't have a built-in trust and a built-in value with the people in your community, I feel like your Facebook ad, your mailer, your yard signs,
icing, not cake.
Yeah, it's the remind. It should be the reminder, not the substance of your relationship. Oh yeah, they have an Easter. I just made that up. I thought it was pretty good too.
Yeah.
So I would say, in the weeks leading up to Easter, find ways, and I would mean months ideally, but when this episode drops, you won't have months. You'll have weeks. Find ways to serve, and maybe use that as a leverage. I will say, we partner with our local school to host an egg hunt. So like, we're not anti egg hunts.
No, we're doing one this year too.
We partner with the school we meet at and rent out with. We partner with the PTA. So like the principal announces it to the 600, 700 students that are there. The PTA's there. So to us, that's not just an egg hunt, but that's actually, or we already have a relationship and we leverage it. And that seems to be way better than just the rando you get. Because what happens is you'll spend $15,000 for a helicopter to fly eggs in for 1,000 people.
I won't, personally.
I know you won't, but churches will, right? And then 10,000 people will come get eggs and go home and never even remember what church they went to.
Yeah.
They had fun and it served them, but it's really not relationally going anywhere.
I have a friend who has a story about flying a helicopter over. You might know this friend. I won't name him because it's a super embarrassing story. The helicopter flew over and it was like already a windy day. And when the helicopter flew over, it was like knocking over kids. Because it was so windy, the helicopter had to fly low. So like the little kids are just like flying around. Like are falling over and the eggs are flying in the sky.
I've heard stories about...
And it started pouring.
I've heard stories of people using like the wrong kind of eggs and just dropping like bad things.
Did you ever hear there was a story? I don't know if this is true or not. It was like a Westboro Baptist type church, kind of that vein. I think they're probably related to them. They did an Easter egg hunt, and that's like so not their thing. But they dropped eggs filled with sand or something, and it was like can't tell people this is what hell's going to be like. Just death falling from the sky.
Yes, that's not one of the four ways to think differently about Easter objects. Serve before you invite. Leverage the season.
Well, and even your Easter egg hunt you're doing with the school.
Yeah,
we're going to do one in a park right by the church.
Yep.
I don't actually think that's like. That's still not the, like, we're not saying don't do that. We're saying don't just do that.
Right.
For you already have a relationship with those parents, with those kids, with those school. You're just saying, hey, this is my extended family, right? Think of your city as an extended family. Your church is your immediate family. How can our immediate family reach out to the extended family and bring them into relationship?
Right.
Well, it's Easter, so we're going to do Easter things together. But I don't think Easter's the only time we should live on mission. Easter's not the only time we should share the gospel.
Well,
and it feels cheap when that's the only time you do.
And the interesting thing, not to go too deep into the weeds on this first point, but like the PTA charters and all these things require an X amount of free events.
Wow.
To be offered to the school per calendar year, because it's, they want to make sure everybody can come to it. And our church comes along. So like, there's no way the PTA could put on an event with the volunteers or whatnot. So we actually then provide an opportunity, a free event for the school. It serves the school, it serves the community, and we leverage it for Easter.
Yeah.
So the second different way to think about Easter is not events at all, not serving at all, but actually using the Easter season as a conversation starter.
Yeah, that's so good.
Just like in Christmas, just a little bit different. People are thinking about Easter things when Easter hits. So they may not be thinking about Jesus. If they're like post-Christian, they might not necessarily be like connecting Easter to the resurrection. They connect Easter to spring break, to flowers, Easter bunnies, and Jesus might not be part of the conversation.
Reese's eggs.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't like the way you started deep breathing when I said that.
I got excited.
I like those.
So true story. One of our family traditions, and it started a couple years ago, is after Easter, after the Easter service that night, we light a campfire in the backyard and we cook s'mores with peeps. Sometimes some of them have peeps in them, and some of them have, which is kind of gross, kind of like dark if you think about it. That just fry those little peeps,
kill those buddies.
But we take Reese's eggs and make a little s'mores out of them, and that's like a super fun family. Like,
how many people in your family have diabetes?
None yet.
Yeah,
maybe
that's rough, bro.
So, anyways, the point is, whether it's new life themes like spring themes, whether it's even Easter and family,
you can connect all that back to the gospel. You just have to be intentional about it.
Yep.
I remember reading a book about this. Is like from the 1970s. It was like 20 spirit-led ways to grow your church past 100 or something. And it was like, it's an old book, so a lot of the ideas are probably outdated. But something they said in the book was that Christmas and Easter cannot be the axiom of church growth. Like they can't be the whole thing we depend on. But what they said was healthy conversations, which I just thought of because of the conversation starter, healthy conversations year round about what does it mean to exist. Mm-hmm. And then at Easter, well, what does it mean to exist in a season of new life? Yeah. What does new life mean? Christmas, what does it mean to exist in a season of gifts? Well, what is a great gift? I think if we actually tried to, through our preaching, through our outreach initiatives, to actually emphasize this idea of like spirituality, like what if churches were actually spiritual? Lost people, at least in my context, I don't know about you, lost people don't like all the gimmicky things. Yeah. So if we do an Easter egg hunt, they're like, oh, that's cute for the kids. Right. And so we'll do it. But you know what really will like win those parents over? Hey, like, let's just have a conversation. Let's actually get to know each other.
Yeah. What's your experience with Easter? Like, what are your traditions? Yeah. I mean, there's 100 questions you could ask that would lead ultimately with just a little bit of conversation would lead toward Jesus invitations. So you're leveraging, and this is true not just for Easter. This is true for Super Bowl. Yeah. This is true for summer break. It's just true for everything. So you use Easter and think about your context. Yeah. What are the questions? What are the rhythms that in your community people are thinking about? If you're a church community, then use that. It's probably if you're a D-church community, you can talk about Jesus and celebrating Easter. If you're a totally lost community, talk about what life looks like, a new life, and spring.
I can't remember who said it, but you and I were talking about this before. You said you should exegete your community just as hard as your text. Yeah. Like you should know your community, where they are. Mm-hmm. And then I think the job of the preacher, pastor, ministry leader is to take the word of a living God and connect it to the voices and the needs of a dying people. Yeah. And to bring those two realities together. And I think Easter's a great time to do that. But I think it's best done through relationship, which leads us to the next one. Yep. Relationally driven, encourage personal invitations, but then also as a church host interactive low pressure events. Right. So relational things. We actually learned this from you guys at Connecting.
You stole something from us?
No, we did it better, but
of course you did.
No, so we didn't do it last year because of the context of the building we were in, whatever. But we do this thing called Reflection Wednesday, and I was surprised. We have several non-believing people come to this. So all it is, we have a building this year that we own. So, praise God. We'll do it from like 9 to 12 and then from like 5 to 8 p.m. We open up the church and we create these interactive stations. They're prayer stations, but what surprised me is non-believers in a world that's hyper meditative, hyper questioning, hyper spirit. I would say the world today is spiritual, but not Christ-like. Yeah. So like when we invited people in, the first year we did it, we had maybe 50 on a Sunday. We had just launched our church. We had like 80 come through at some point because it's a come when you want, no service, just come through the stations. But what's interesting is I'd say 30, 40 of those people were not believers and they were invited by a friend. So a friend would say, hey, it's not a service. It might be a little weird, but it's just like questions and like these like stations you can walk through. Yeah. And people came, and we actually had several people come to that and then start coming to our church. Yeah. And several come on Easter. It was a low pressure event. They could come when they wanted, leave when they wanted. You're not committing to an hour service. You're not committing to hear weird specials on a flute. You're just coming to hear and learn and talk about spiritual things. Yeah. That was a little too contextualized to my current situation. Like it was just organic.
I think
our worship pastor's in the room. He's just dying in a corner right now.
I was like, that's oddly specific. Yeah. That sounds interesting. Yeah. But I think the key is this. If you are hoping that your mailer and your even your massive like community-wide egg hunt, that the bigger your event, the bigger the reach, the less likely it is to actually have the relational connection that I think is required. I really do think, especially in a smaller church context or a new church context. Your church is not the cool church to go to. No. It's not the traditional church to go to. You don't have grandmas and grandpas that are bringing their whole families. Like new churches just don't have the pull of established churches.
Correct.
So unless you have a relational driven invitation, I just don't see a lot of people showing up to these special services. But if you were doing, if 2 weeks ago you had your neighbors over for a meal.
Yes, absolutely.
And you were talking about, you're excited about your church's Easter Sunday and you personally invite them. Right. It's like, hey, we'd love to come together. And afterwards you can have a campfire with s'mores and with Peeps and Reese's. Then like that changes the conversation. I really think if I look back at the 7 years of our church plant's existence, we've had probably a handful of families just randomly show up on Sunday.
Sure.
And not actually, I can randomly know every single one was one we come in and do like a big outreach event, but we didn't have not relational connection.
Right.
The vast majority have been because somebody cared enough to actually invite them. So leverage your people to invite. Have those low pressure events leading up into Easter that tap into Easter. I honestly would rather have 30 neighborhood backyard egg hunts than one giant citywide one. Because if you can get your neighbors there interacting with one another, that to me, that's more relational than they're doing 16 other egg hunts and your church just happens to be on the click list. So when you send a follow-up email, they're like, which egg hunt was that?
Right.
So,
well, that's so
but they won't forget your backyard.
Even the reflection ones, I think I was talking about, those people who came, it was friends. So like we have a girl who works at H&M in the mall and she said to her friend, hey, when I get off, I'm going over to my church. They just have this like kind of Eastery, just, learn about Jesus thing. And that sounds super weird. Like it sounds weird that someone came to a prayer thing, but it was because they had a relationship and because it was low, like there was no service. There was no, like it doesn't have to just be your Easter service. Yeah. So at our church, we're doing a full Holy Week thing this year. Wednesday, we're doing Maundy, Thursday, we're doing Good Friday. Not to do more activity, but it's creating more touch points. Mm-hmm. So we're basically walking through like, Wednesday, it'll be prayer stations based on the last week of Jesus' life. Maundy, Thursday, Last Supper. Good Friday, the cross. Saturday, nothing. Sunday, Easter. The hope is that people will have multiple invitation points. Yeah. So someone might not come to the Easter service because they go to their grandma's. They're not connected to their grandma's church, but they go there. But they might come to the Maundy Thursday service, which is in our fellowship hall. Different environment. We'll sing a song or two. We'll walk through a traditional Passover type meal. Mm-hmm. One of our pastors is going to preach for 15 minutes on the Last Supper. Like, it's okay to connect them there. So, do you know what I mean? Like, creating, I think, multiple invitation points beyond just Easter Sunday.
That one critical, this service or no other thing.
Dude, we had someone get baptized a few weeks after Easter last year. They came for the first time on Easter. And I asked them, I said, well, who brought you on Easter? And it was a friend of theirs. And they said, it was crazy. They said, like, 8 people invited me to their Easter service. Which I was like, whoa.
That's rare. You would think.
I'm not sure it is though. If someone has Christian friends, I think, what does every church say around Easter?
Invite your friends. Yeah.
Right. So like creating more like, and this person said the reason they came to our church was not because we were like, they said, honestly, they were like looking on social media, I would have came to your church. They said the reason that I picked this church to come to is because you guys handed out cookies. And my grandma had heard about you. Seriously. So like creating connection
but it goes back to what we've seen all along. Serve before you invite. Right. Like you already have that relationship.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a few things that actually kind of lead into this point, like the prayer services, the stations.
Because we're kind of mystical.
Yes. Is use Easter to tap into spiritual curiosity. We've already said this, but people are naturally spiritually curious. Like I really think that people want to know, why do churches make Easter such a big deal? Yeah. Why is the resurrection such a big deal? Why do churches make all these things happen? So to me, I and this is one I'm actually more on the thinking through. Yeah. I was like, what it would look like to have a Q&A like moment where you're just like, hey, are you curious what Jesus is about? Yeah. We're doing a quick Bible study that says everything you need to know about Jesus and the resurrection. Yeah. Or I don't know. I don't have a good answer for this yet. I was actually brainstorming with Pam. We were walking yesterday and like trying to figure out how do I find somebody who's spiritually curious that doesn't need to come to an egg hunt. They need to sit down at the table and talk about Jesus. How do I get those people into conversation? So like, a Discover Christianity or like an Alpha. They Alpha Ministries. They kind of all do that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But how do you look for the questions that they're asking? And like, does the resurrection matter?
Can I jump on that real quick?
I want you to. That's why I'm saying all these things.
Well, I would say if I had to pick one, for us, the use Easter as a conversation starter is probably where we're like the weakest. I think tapping into spiritual curiosity is one where we're probably
strong.
Yeah. But part of that's the makeup of our church. We're reaching a lot of 20-somethings.
And you're reaching a lot of not D-church, but on-church people.
Yeah, we have people who have never been to church before. A lot of people like that. I was reading this commentary. I've said this like 3 episodes. People are going to be like, is he still preaching that?
Ecclesiastes?
Yeah. Well, you know the verse, nothing new under the sun. It's a book. The author's right there. Who's the name? Someone Gibson. Thanks,
Greg.
Buddy. Yeah, Greg.
Nope.
David Gibson. Yeah, he wrote this book, Living Life Backwards, and he makes the point that when it says there's nothing new under the sun, it's not actually saying that we'll never find something new, right? Like, obviously, when we went to the space, we found something new, and we could keep finding new things. What he was saying is we'll never find a new that satisfies. There will never be a new thing that satisfies our ears or our eyes. We'll never hear something good enough, see something good enough, taste something sweet enough that will satisfy that deep longing in our hearts. And he makes the point, and I loved this. He said, every human being was made from outside of this world, not for this world, but for the one who made the world. Yeah. So the reason we all have an unsatisfiable desire is because nothing in this world, no new, will ever satisfy our otherworldly desire for God. And I read that, and dude, I'm like thinking of conversations that I'm pastoring, and I'm like, whoa, this is why addiction, this is why gluttony, this is why
they're looking
lust. Right. So I think Easter is an opportunity. If the Bible is true, which I believe it is, and I hope our listeners do, especially if they're ministry leaders, but it's 2025, so who knows what people believe. You never know. I think that knowing the people in your community have those spiritual questions and needs. It's not do they do. So how do you leverage that? I told you we're going to do a series of theology of food. And we're going to make different invite cards that say things like, what does the Bible say about alcohol? What does the Bible say about fasting? What does the Bible say about gluttony? What does the Bible say about anorexia? And we're going to hand those out. People ask this. People actually care. You'd be surprised. And I think that our conservative, we have a Southern Baptist background, our conservative, politically at times heavy tribe, man, I think that we have this idea that like lost people in the liberal world, they don't care about the Bible.
Yeah.
I found that to be the opposite. When you say, hey, do you want to talk about what the Bible says about insert thing they care about? They're curious, even if they don't agree.
Yeah.
I think you should leverage that.
I 100% agree.
Tap into it.
Tap into that.
To quote you. You're collecting your thoughts.
No, there was a book called the guy that wrote No Silver Bullets wrote a book called Discipleship Opportunity. Daniel, I can't think of his last name.
Not Henderson.
No, it's M.
He's a great guy. We should get him on the show sometime.
We should. So he wrote a book. It's called Discipleship Opportunity.
Yeah.
And he broke people into 4 different categories, and one of the categories was Daniel M. I think is how you say that. He broke people in different categories, and one of them was the spiritual or the churched curious, like the church spiritually hungry, people who actually go to church and want to know Jesus.
Right.
But then you have the churched uninterested, which are people who actually show up at church but don't care about Jesus.
Right.
But then you have people in your community who are not churched but spiritually interested.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we frame our church outreach to the churched uninterested. And we wonder why it's not effective.
We wonder why we don't baptize people.
Yeah. How do we pivot?
They're already baptized.
How do we pivot toward the unchurched in the community that are spiritually curious?
And can I tell you what I think is interesting? I think the churched, uninterested person that we're trying to reach through Easter, I actually think the most attractive, sexy thing in the world to a nominal Christian is a faith that actually matters.
Yeah.
This is a whole other, we could do an episode on this.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're pausing this one.
But the reason I think that we have so many at campus, and this isn't a brag, the reason I think we have so many young people engaged in ministry who are passionate about Jesus, who are sacrificing. I mean, we just in the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 or 3 seniors from Boston, Baltimore, like way better, way cooler places in Salisbury say, I'm staying in Salisbury. I'm getting a job. I'm moving here.
To be here.
Because of the church.
That's amazing.
Because they're bought into the mission and vision.
Yep.
And they were people I would say before were spiritually uninterested Christians.
Yeah.
Because there's something about living out the mission of Jesus, seeing faith that matters, that I think is attractive.
Yeah.
So what if instead of trying to reach the uninterested Christian, you tried to reach the dead in the grave lost person? Man, I think when you reach them, that uninterested Christian, all of a sudden they're going to peek up and be like,
Something's going on.
oh, this Christianity isn't like
Yep.
Christianity I know. This matters.
Yep.
Yeah. What if Christianity mattered?
So
That could be an episode.
the pivot for us is how do we leverage the season, not just the Easter Sunday morning service? If you've heard it said, like, Easter is the Super Bowl of church services.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. But
I don't either. That's the whole point of this episode. Our goal, though, my goal for Easter, and I think our win and your win should be not just who shows up at Easter morning, but who shows up in May because of the service you've done and the outreach you've done and the spiritual conversations you've had during Easter season.
Yeah.
Sound good to you?
Sounds good. I think we end on that note.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ministry Mix podcast. We hope you found this content helpful for your soul and for your ministry. If you found something valuable today, would you do us a favor and share this with a ministry leader? Maybe you're already deep into planning Easter outreach, but send this episode to somebody so that way they can hear what's going on and be a part of the conversation. We'd love it if you would like and review and do all the things to help our podcast get before other ministry leaders just like you. If you haven't connected with us on social media, check us out at Ministry Mix and engage with us. If you have an outreach idea for Easter, comment on that post. Let us know what you're thinking about outreach as well. But until next time, keep leading and caring for your soul.